Bring the agenda briefing meeting to order. We have several presentations later this evening. Consent agenda, C1 is approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement to purchase a total containment vessel from NABCO Nebesco Systems, LLC of Nottingham, Maryland, in the amount of $607,949 with funds awarded from the Department of Homeland Security, and this is a port security grant. Oh, Madam Clerk, do I need to take a roll call? Is Mrs. Spears with us?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Dylan was waiting to get confirmation on Mr. Spears, but yes, you do need to do a roll call.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, are you here? Councilmember Reinbach, you here? Councilmember Anderson? Councilmember Barnett? Councilmember Spears? Councilmember Spears? Hello?
He's trying to log in right now.
Okay,
so.
Councilmember Waddell? And the chair is here. Okay, we'll continue. Item 03 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement to purchase one firefighter cab and chassis for an amount of $102,149 from Velocity Vehicles Group, Carolinas, to LLC of Wilmington, North Carolina. C4 is a resolution to adjust accounts receivable for uncollectible accounts. C5 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute primary and secondary standby contracts for debris management, recovery, and removal services with DRC Emergency Services, LLC of Galveston, Texas, and TFR Enterprises Incorporated of Leander, Texas, and this was continued from our June 6, 2023 meeting.
Mr. Mayor, would it be possible, I spoke with Dave May this morning, I'd just like for Dave, if he would, and he says he's ready to go through kind of like the process and how we do that.
Please.
Thank you, Dave.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
Just real quick, to go over the process, we went through a fairly rigorous process to evaluate the submittals that we got for this proposal. First of all, the method of procurement. RFP is very different than a bid for construction. Bids for construction, we take, as an example, for a construction contract, we're required to take the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. It's also different from an RFQ process that's used for architectural engineering services. That is a qualifications-only process. An RFP kind of fits right in between there for other professional services, and it actually allows us to establish criteria within the RFP in which the staff develop or review the proposals based on different weights of factors that are included in the proposal and that we ask for in the proposal. We received 9 submittals from companies all over the country, mainly in the Southeast. All of these are disaster response type companies that have done debris removal in all over the Southeast following hurricanes. The evaluation criteria and the scoring guide. This is what I was talking about. This is what we established within the proposal that was submitted as part of the RFP. So all the bidders knew about this up front. So the evaluation criteria was provided in the RFP to all the bidders. The scoring guide was used by staff internally to evaluate those proposals based on what they submitted. So the criteria that we use, number one, the qualifications and contractor staff, that was weighted at 30%. And we looked at, in the scoring guide, we used the years of experience with similar type disaster response, number of similar projects, and also the capacity of the company to handle similar sized projects. Second criteria was their response time commitment, weighted at 25%. In the contract or in the RFP, we require that if there's a known event that's got a fairly high chance of hitting us, we require, number one, that they meet with us before the event arrives, and that they are actually boots on the ground within 48 hours after the event. That's a requirement in the RFP. So first of all, we want them to acknowledge that requirement, and also we review reference information that they provided from other municipalities, other entities that they've worked for, and how they've responded. Criteria number 3 is financial stability, weighted at 10%. We look at their ability to proceed. Do they have the ability for us to get started with the work while we're trying to get our stuff in order? Back in Florence, if you remember, our contractor was on the ground literally before you had even seen anything from us about them showing up. So we also look at their invoicing and payments to subcontractors, as well as handling multiple contracts. Because all of these companies, if there's a hurricane that hits, they're doing work all over the place. Fourth criteria was price, 30%. We conducted a simulation analysis. We don't ask them for one price. We ask them for probably over 125 separate unit prices. And we take those unit prices, we take a sampling of those unit prices, we build quantities that simulate an event that may be similar to what we've had in the past, and we calculate what the cost is. So that's how we've run we analyze prices through that simulation analysis. The fifth criteria is their technical and reimbursement assistance experience, weighted at 5%, and that's all about their documentation. As you well know, documentation is the name of the game when it comes to reimbursement, and we want to make sure that they're experienced and have knowledge about the guidelines. These are the results of the top 5 companies. DRC, which is our recommendation for the primary contractor, received the highest score. Their pricing ranked as the 4th lowest price. TFR is our secondary contractor. Their score was 347, or 86.75 average, and their price was the lowest, actually. Ceres, we actually held a meeting with them on Friday of last week to go over their results. They were number 3, and their price was actually second to the highest. Phillips and Jordan was 4th. Their price was just behind, or just above, DRC. And then lastly, Ash Britt, also another big company, was 5th in ranking, but they actually had the highest price through the simulation analysis. So that was a very quick summary and overview of our process. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, just a question. The guy that came in second, and he had the lowest bid. Give me a rationale why you picked the other guy, even though his scores were just a tad bit higher.
It would be based on the weight that internally we provided on all the other categories. We may have weighted another company higher because they've done larger projects for more companies. TFR, for example, may have done an equal number of projects, but if they're doing a project where they're hauling 50,000 cubic yards as a project, that doesn't quite match up to a company like DRC or Ceres that has done a project where they're hauling 2 million cubic yards of debris. So we looked at the qualifications and the experience and the capacity of that company based on, the other type of work that they've done. And for example, that would be an example of why we would not choose the company that had the lowest unit prices. And also keep in mind that the lowest price is just based on the simulation that we ran. That's not, we didn't ask for a bid to build something. We just asked for unit prices so we know going into a storm or in responding to a storm, we would know what we would have to pay them per unit, per cubic yard of debris that they haul off.
Dunbar?
Let Neil go.
Okay, go ahead.
Dave, looking at simulation, I guess comes to mind is, how many cities, I'm just, pitching this, so I haven't put a ton of thought into it, but how many cities over 100,000 per se, or a big, reasonable size city? I just used 100,000. Do they each, the two we've chosen contract with? I guess where I'm headed with it is, suppose you have a storm in South Florida. 2 weeks later, you have one in Louisiana, and I know this rarely happens that tight, but could. And then 2 weeks later, one here. If they're contracted with, I'll make up a town, Melbourne, and then they're contracted, 2 or 3 cities in Florida and 2 or 3 cities in Louisiana, and then we have our storm. What's their capacity to respond?
That's a great question. It's one thing that we did not include is who else are you contracted with. What we did do is try and assess to the best of our ability, their ability to manage multiple contracts at the same time. So when in the submittals that they gave us, they're responding to Hurricane Irma or Hurricane Florence, and they would list out the municipalities that they worked for during that storm. So that tells us that they've, and again, it may be that they're working for a small town of 50,000 and they do a small project, but they've also got another larger one. So we, to the best of our ability, we've looked at it based on the experience that they've had in the past for multiple contracts during a single event.
I mean, to me, that's the nightmare, that all of a sudden they're busy everywhere. We can't we don't have enough manpower. We don't have enough trucks. We don't, whatever it is, equipment. So, I mean, I hear you, sounds like you've worked it in the best you can, but I would, contracting with seeing how many cities they have of substance from, in these places where hurricanes hit all the time might be something we should look at in the future. I'm just thinking, I don't know how many, if they have 100 trucks and 50 of them are in both places, in 2 different places, are they going to, I guess they're going to, do they agree to pull some off? You follow me? Like if they're reacting already in 2 locations, are they going to pull trucks off those to come help us?
So a lot of these companies operate more as brokers. I may not be using a very good word here to describe it, but they don't necessarily own 100 trucks.
Right. They have contractors, independent contractors.
Right. They have,
So those independent contractors, I would assume they're going to go where we get paid the most.
that is a problem. In fact, that happened
So
during Hurricane Florence to the city of Wilmington. However, through the resources that our contractor had, we never missed a beat. If 2 guys leave because they want to go to Florida to respond to Hurricane Michael, which is what happened, they're backfilling with another sub. So it's a bit of a shell game, and that's why we are asking you for permission to contract with 2 vendors.
No, I think that's great. I'm just trying to, if you just follow that's interesting that 2 leave and 2 come, because, obviously they left to go to Florida for more money, or either it's closer to their home, or, I mean, maybe there's some other small factor. But these guys in storm season, as I understand it, it's all about money. It's when they make their money. So it's like, they don't care if it's in where it is. So the other, I guess, is really the one that, did you do any references? Like, did you talk to cities of our size or larger that had a storm of magnitude, and just ask city managers or folks in your position how'd they perform?
So the process that we went through, there's room for improvement. I want to be very transparent about how we went about it. We chose 5 contacts that were provided from each proposal, and we reached out to the contact that they provided via email, via phone, And we sent them a reference form for them to respond.
The contacts would be what kind, like folks in your position or a manager? Okay, thanks.
It'd be a city manager. If it was a small town, it might be a city manager. If it was a bigger town, it might be someone like myself. So if you do the math, that's 45. We sent out 45 contacts to the people that they put in their proposal. We got 5 responses. So we need to improve on that process, because we can't judge the company on the fact that whoever they put in their proposal didn't respond. We don't know if they were on vacation. We don't even know if they work there anymore. And literally those are some of the things that did occur, is that, either it came back late or we didn't get it at all. But what we did do is we took a deeper dive into the information that they provided about the projects that they worked on. And we also looked at every single one of them provided letters of recommendation, reference letters from other places. And so we took the time and we looked at those. And I mean, there might be 20 or 25 of those in a proposal. So they're really trying to make sure that we know and understand that, they respond. And of course, they're not going to put in a letter of reference that's not from a contact that they're probably going to get a positive response from. But I think the thing that we'll need to work on going forward is how do we elicit that response independently from the contractor,
Well, I guess I would suggest, put the ball in their court a little bit. It should be on them to suggest. I mean, I don't know that we need that many. If you had 3 cities of 100,000 and greater, or counties, whatever, and it should be on them to have contacts that still work there, that are still there, and just have literally just 3. And we pick up the phone and we call them. Because like you say, they're going to submit what's good. And, I don't know if you put a time frame on that. Was that the last 5 years, last 10 years, 15 years, because you can really pick and choose if you leave that time frame out there. And I hate to dwell on this, but this is huge for us. We let this pass some years, and then I just want to, when these storms hit after that, the mayor's phone, I'm sure, blows up, the city phone. I mean, it's huge. So I just want to make sure it sounds like you are, but adding those few things certainly wouldn't, or like you said, trying to improve it a little bit wouldn't hurt. Thanks, Dave.
I would just add one thing real quickly. The DRC is very familiar. I'm sure you've heard the acronym for them. We've had them under contract. They were our responder in Hurricane Florence, and they've responded for at least 3 other storms that I can remember. TFR was actually, they were under contract with us about 10 years ago as our secondary contract. And I was just telling Mr. Rabenbart before, we've never activated a secondary contract. We've never had to, because we've always been successful. Whoever was our primary contractor has been able to bring the resources and provide response. So,
Has Ceres ever been one of our first or second people?
they are currently our second. Yes.
Have they ever been activated to actually do cleanup?
No, sir.
Never had to.
Never had to.
And I guess if you if you had the luxury of a large staff and you could call and check, get down into the weeds on these people, and you just haven't had that ability to do that. You look at their references, and of course, like you just said, nobody's going to put a reference, just like when you apply for a job or your resume. You don't put somewhere where a guy fired you. But there's no way of telling whether that happened or not. They could have had some bad experiences in some towns. And the guys that get picked number 2 in the event of a major catastrophe, they're number 1 somewhere. They're not just going to sit around and say, well, I'm number 2 in Wilmington. They're on somebody's first list when they're going to be bound to report to that person as the event occurs. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So you're really relying on number 1 to come and do it. God forbid we have a hurricane that comes and just tears up the entire East Coast from Florida to the Virginia Capes. But it could happen. I mean, God, it's happened before. So you just, you know, you hope that your number one can do it and your number two can do it. I guess where I'm coming from on this is I hope our number two is what they say they are and would be on the ground. They finished very close, and they're very, you know, they're very much want to be here. So I trust the process. I know you've had conversations with the representatives from Ceres, and I trust y'all's judgment. Just want to make sure that in the event we have money to pay them, and we know what we're talking about, and that they're here, because there is nothing worse than having all that stuff piled up. I mean, everybody here is experienced with it, and it's not fun. So anyway, thank you very much for coming up and making that good presentation, because I wasn't aware of how much detail you went into already. So thank you, Dave.
Yes, sir.
I just also want to say thank you. I think it's great for us to really understand how you make that decision, and for us, the people that lived through Florence and saw how effective they were, gee, welcome back. I mean, these guys were amazing, and they were here, Johnny on the spot, and did an amazing job. So I really appreciate what y'all did in trying to evaluate that in a fair and equitable way. So thanks again.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Dave, real quick, is the county using the same, the DRC?
I believe they are. Yes, sir.
And is their number two, who's their number 2 and 3, do you know?
I'm not. Do you know, Rick? We can certainly
All right.
call and find out.
All right, just curious, thank you.
Thank you.
Public hearings, PH1 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish a dwelling at 3613 Tree Street as unfit for human habitation, directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. Ordinances, these are all second readings of the budget. 01A is the ordinance making appropriations in the general fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. 01B is an ordinance making appropriations to the grants, projects, financial plans, enterprise funds, debit service fund, special tax district for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. 01C is an ordinance making appropriations to the capital projects funds for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. 01D is an ordinance amending various chapters of the City of Wilmington fee schedule for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. 02 is an ordinance to amend various funds to comply with accounting requirements of GASB statement number 87 regarding leases, and of GASB statement number 96 regarding subscription-based information technology arrangements, and establish a debit service fund reserve. Item 03 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $482,153 from the North Carolina Parks and Recreation Trust Fund to add an accessible playground and outdoor fitness equipment at Maids Park. 04 is an ordinance reducing the speed limit from 35 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour along all streets in the River's Edge neighborhood. Item 05 is an ordinance accepting and appropriating funds from the 2022 Assistance to Firefighters Grant to purchase equipment, modify facilities, provide for training, assist with wellness and fitness programs, and purchase personal protective equipment, PPE, in the amount of $48,375. Resolutions. R1 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with SHI International Corporation for Microsoft Enterprise Licensing Agreement. Item R2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 4-year master license agreement with Dell Financial Services, LLC of Round Rock, Texas, for an annual cost not to exceed $200,000. R3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to request additional STBGP-DA funding from the Wilmington Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization in the amount of $960,000, with the required $240,000 local grant match from the city for the Hooker Road multi-use path, Hinton Avenue multi-use path, and Riceville Avenue and Greenville Avenue intersection improvements.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Mr. Rumbar?
I'd like to chat about that for a minute. I don't know where we are with with moving forward with this. I know that we've taken the bumpy bus ride out there and looked at the way it's going. The people can never be seen to be pleased with the latest and greatest design. And I know that you said the other night in conversation that we need it for connection. Fair?
Yes, sir.
I just have a problem with putting something in a neighborhood where I would like to table this for a couple of weeks, and during that couple of weeks, I would like to either see a whole outpouring of support for this project or the other, and if it's the other, I'd like to pull this project and go elsewhere.
We have a presentation prepared for you. We can share it with you now, or we can do it tonight, or both, which talks about the various funding mechanisms that have been placed into this and the amount of funding that's been put into the project thus far, and the fact that it will not be available to go to other projects, and perhaps, and I don't know this for sure, some of it may need to be paid back. So we can run that presentation for you right now if you'd like to see it.
I appreciate that. I just hate to have the money force me to make a decision that those people out there hate, and just, I mean, I think we're trying to do something very nice in their community that's been going on way too long.
Yes, sir.
This thing's had 10 or 11 birthdays.
Yes, sir.
And I'm just tired of it. And I think they're tired of it. A lot of the players that were in the game when it first started, they've either died, moved, or don't care. It's just something that I don't know if anybody else up here feels the same way I do, but I'm tired of it.
I think
I'd like
it'd be
to put our money
beneficial.
where they want us to be.
I think it'd be beneficial to receive that presentation now, especially if there's discussion of potentially tabling it. I think it's worthwhile.
Mike, can you come forward and help us out with this, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
Before we get into it, I'm just curious, Tony, I mean, is this resolution really kind of two separate piles? I mean, I imagine this has a deadline. You'd want it has a deadline, I would presume?
It does, and Mike will go through that.
Well, my point
process.
was, we may want to apply for it even if later we decide to take, I mean, they might not run concurrently. We got to stay on the track in case we end up doing it, I would think. But go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, to answer your question, as far as the deadline, we do have a federal grant deadline at the end of 2024, but what we're working towards right now is this additional funding. If the request to pursue that additional funding is approved this evening, we plan to go before the MPO board in July to get that funding and continue to move forward. So this is a critical step in keeping this project rolling.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Let's rock and roll on this.
Let's roll through this. I know you all are very familiar with this project, and we spoke about it a few times, so I'll try to go through this quickly, give you an update. Feel free to stop me if you have questions about the topic I'm going over, or we can talk about it at the end. The topics that we prepared for you today is just a quick reminder of what the project scope is, a budget update that talks about the funds that have been spent to date and all the historical information. The question that Councilman Rivenbark has asked, about the regional planning network and why this connection is needed, the estimated schedule to complete this project, and also property acquisition, what types are out there and how it's affecting the current property owners. So real quick, the project scope here continues to be along Hooker Road, an 8-foot wide multi-use path that runs from the current multi-use path, Cross City Trail behind UNCW at Rose Avenue, and will tie back into Wrightsville Avenue. Down on the bottom of your screen, we have the Hinton Avenue multi-use path, which is another 8-foot wide multi-use path that connects the River to Sea Bikeway at Park Avenue up till Greenville Ave. And then there's a connection between the two that's called the Wrightsville-Greenville intersection improvements, and this is an intersection realignment that also adds new sidewalks and bike lanes along that road. And as you've heard in the past, we are combining these three projects as far as managing them just because of the close proximity to try to keep them all moving at the same pace and potentially realize some savings when we bid this. Here's a very detailed breakdown. I know there was questions about the money spent to date. It breaks down the amount of the funds that have been used for all three projects: Hooker Road, multi-use path, Hinton, multi-use path, and the Wrightsville-Greenville intersection improvements. It further breaks down what is the federal DA grant funding, what is our local match, and also what are exclusively only city funds, A lot of these numbers are rounded, but over to the right, you can see the total that has been spent to date for each of the projects, with a grand total of $834,000 and change.
Quick
Yes.
question, clarification. I was trying to figure it out when I was looking at this over the weekend, but if the Hooker Road portion is pulled out, and we don't move forward with that, but we were to move forward with Hinton and Wrightsville, Greenville, would the entire amounts of the SDBGP grant funds for all three buckets have to be refunded, or exclusively the bucket for Hooker Road?
These, I believe the answer to your question is it would just be Hooker Road. These projects originated as 3 separate projects, and again, they were combined for management just for expediency.
Okay.
So that would, I believe, only affect the Hooker Road.
All right. I think
Although
that's
it does obviously remove a critical connection point that we'll talk about later.
but that's an important designation for our decision-making, I think.
Understood.
Thank you.
And the next slide here actually sums it up a little bit better, so you can see the project on the left. The amount of the city funding and local funding that have been spent or encumbered to date was about $546,000. If for some reason one section or all of the sections are decided not to move forward, you can see the amount that would have to be repaid to the NCDOT as part of the grant funding in the amount of almost $300,000, and that's a combination of all 3 projects. Again, for the grand total of $834,000 and change that has been spent to date.
Sorry, one more
Yes.
clarification.
Let me go back.
How would that affect the potential grant funds then? Would it just be the grant funding for that Hooker Road portion because they are 3 separate projects? If we were to pull that out, would we still receive grant funding for the Hinton and Wrightsville, Greenville?
That is my understanding, because these were requested back many years ago as separate projects. So I think it would only affect the grant funding for that.
Okay, thank you.
You talk about the funding piece. I keep hearing you say that we put these 3 projects together because we're looking at the connectivity,
Right.
correct? So if we pull out, let's say, the Hooker project, then we lose that connectivity, which is what we are trying to do throughout the entire city.
Absolutely.
Correct. Okay.
And that, I have some maps coming up that'll go over that regional connectivity, because it's, you know, it's not just about the benefits that the users of those particular roads would receive, it's the regional connectivity to all of our.
It's bigger, and I think oftentimes, we have neighborhoods who complain all the time, all the time. And because we're looking at the bigger good, I would hope that we could keep the project.
Well, Cliff, that's what we've been talking about the whole time, along the folks along Hooker Road. It's part of the connectivity, and it doesn't register.
Register
They're
to
looking
them.
at their stretch.
Yeah.
And I get that, I understand that, but, it comes a point that somebody out there or in those neighborhoods that stream off of Hooker Road needs to come and say, we want this, we're gonna give you room for cover. I mean, we're the bad guy out there trying to do this thing, and I don't like that.
Well, I would like to add, and we can get into this a little bit, Councilman Rivenbark, to date, we have had 60% acceptance of the various offers that have gone out there. So there are many residents out there that are.
Well, I sure as hell hadn't seen any of them or heard any of them. All I get's the other.
Well, isn't that always true?
True.
That we rarely hear from the people that are happy and satisfied. Generally, what we hear are the people that are not. But I just want to point out that there are many other places, well, maybe not many, but there are other places in the city where they did not want this. I'm thinking Devon Park, when it went down off of Wrightsville, down into Devon Park. And there are no complaints about that now. I think the idea of it, I can understand why there's negativity, but once it's there and it's not that problematic, it's much more accepted. But I'm happy to hear that you've had 60%. I think that's a good thing. I'd like to see us just move forward, keep doing this, continue with our commitment that we've made to have a connected trail, and it is regional, so I would not be in favor of tabling it. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, I could, I don't have that information today, but I could definitely share that with you. That's based off of the acceptance letters that have been sent out where they've signed off. We're still working through closing and all that, but absolutely. This slide here is tied to the item that's being brought to you tonight, where we are requesting the ability to go forward and ask for additional funding with the federal grant. The total cost to complete the project over on the left there, you can see for Hooker Road is about $2.7 million. Hinton Avenue is about $1.3 million, and Wrightsville Greenville is about $1.5 million. When you look at the difference between what we have and what we need, there is a grand total of about $1.2 million that we are requesting to cover the difference. 80% of that would be covered by the grant funds. The additional 20%, $240,000, is currently in the project, so we would not need to go and pursue that additional funding. So this is a topic of what we've been discussing here about the regional planning, and there's been a lot of questions, why Hooker Road? Is there an alternative? And I'll have a slide on the next here that will show the map, but really it is the interconnectivity of both the current and the future facilities throughout the region. This, as I mentioned, if we remove Hooker Road, we lose that ability with the connection from Hooker to Wrightsville, to Greenville, to Hinton, that provide all that interconnectivity, which also ultimately connects and provides a link to the current Cross-City Trail between UNCW, Eastwood Road, through Autumn Hall, Wrightsville Beach, River to Sea Bikeway, the ability to get to MP Park, tying to the new Greenville Loop Trail that we're currently under construction with, ultimately tying back to the Central College Trail that we recently completed, and the overall Cross-City Trail network. It sounds like a lot, but all of these are interlinked. And they're also approved by a vision that has been set forth a long time ago with a long-term recognized connectivity need. The Walk Wilmington plan back in 2009 that was approved included sidewalks along Hooker, Wrightsville, Greenville Ave, and Hinton. The comprehensive Greenway plan in 2013 that's currently being updated as we speak included bicycle facilities along Hooker Road and Wrightsville Ave. And all these tie into a complete streets policy that we approved and adopted back in 2009. Here's the map that I wanted to share with you. You can see the highlighted road, which I apologize is upside down because we oriented the map to show north up. But if I can get my cursor here, Hooker Road is highlighted right here. To the left, which would be the west, you can see how it ties into the current Cross-City Trail that connects behind UNCW, ultimately down to College Road, and eventually to our South Car Trail that is in design and right-of-way acquisition right now. It also ties to the north through our Cross-City Trail that runs behind Autumn Hall and up through Eastwood Road to Wrightsville Beach. To the right here, this is this, whoops, 1 second, went too quick. To the right here, this is our proposed projects that are combined. You have the Hooker Road multi-use path. These are the future sidewalks that'll be combined with the existing bike lanes along Wrightsville Ave, then tie into the Greenville Ave, Wrightsville intersection project with sidewalks and bike lanes, and ultimately the Hinton Ave multi-use path to tie into the Park Ave multi-use path, which is our River to Sea Bikeway, which ultimately ties to the Greenville Loop Trail, which is under construction, and I can kind of go on and on how all these tie together. The other question that came up from a lot of the Hooker Road residents is why not just bike lanes? You can see the image to the right, and it kind of illustrates the constraints. That is a scaled version of what the current pavement width looks like out there now, and coming in there and striping your typical 4-foot bike lanes, you can see how a vehicle going down each lane with the bikes, it does not fit. So regardless, we can't just stripe bike lanes. To achieve what our different vision is in these plans, we would have to widen the pavement section an additional 4 feet on both sides. That also, if we just do that, does not accommodate the pedestrian piece that's part of our complete streets policy and would tie to all this other network around the city. This is just real quick, the complete streets policy. You can see the image over on the right there. That is Randall Parkway. That has our traffic lanes, our 4-foot, sometimes 5-foot bike lane, and a sidewalk. That is the vision that we look at when we approved and adopted the Complete Streets policy back in 2009. I'll go through these super quick. This is just the regional planning for the Walk Wilmington plan. This is an excerpt that shows all the orange that you see on this map are all these sidewalks that have either been built or will be built that were proposed as part of this plan. Comprehensive Greenway Plan, it shows the bicycle facilities along Hooker and Wrightsville that tie into the River to Sea Bikeway on Park. The River to Sea Bikeway, you can see in blue here, runs through this same general area, and has a component that runs up Park Avenue, and Hooker Road is right between, you can see the straight line connector between Wrightsville Ave and the path behind UNCW. And lastly, this is the update that the MPO is working on for the Walk Wilmington plan, which shows the funding for these projects we're talking about today. Lastly, for regional planning in 2016, we were given a bronze award by the League of American Bicyclists for a bicycle-friendly community, along with a few other municipalities. Estimated schedule to wrap things up. We are well into the property acquisition phase. We are expecting in the next few months here to complete that and be able to prepare a bid package for the NCDOT to provide fund authorization. The bidding completion is expected to be done in early 2004, and then construction completion in the fall of 2024 within our federal deadline to spend these funds. You can see in here there's multiple NCDOT approvals that need to be part of that, and also we are banking on, obviously, a successful bidding award. Last topic I just wanted to talk about briefly is property acquisition, the types and the impacts to the property owners. We went back and looked at this when a lot of questions came up, and contrary to, I think, a lot of belief that we're getting from the residents out there, is the majority of this trail is within city property. The right-of-way purchase is only 2% of the overall property acquisition that we're performing across all 3 corridors. The remaining acquisitions are easements, whether it be a temporary construction easement where we're just tying in the grades, or pouring back a driveway to make sure there's not a big bump when they go over. And then also in some instances where property owners have placed some of their items out in the right-of-way, we're getting TCE to be able to relocate their encroachments out of the right-of-way and build our path. The other 2 items are permanent utility easements for Duke Energy, which are mostly overhead and along Hinton Avenue. Doesn't really affect Hooker too much. And permanent drainage easements to just allow us access to some of our stormwater improvements to maintain them. Here's a quick summary table that has all 3 projects summarized. And you can see there's currently, we're seeking 51,000 square feet of property acquisition. But of all that, only 830 square feet is actual right-of-way where we're purchasing and land from those property owners. Everything else is easements, which again is only 2%.
I'd just like to know how much time we have spent as a city staff time in the last 10 years. Does anybody have any idea in respect to this project? Because we haven't even counted that into this calculation, number one. Number two, in respect to the neighbors and what have you, I've heard all kinds of things. I remember when Laura Padgett was here and we were trying desperately to get this project off the ground. One of the questions I have for our staff and for you, City Manager, is have we learned any lessons about this particular project? Because this project should have been done years ago, number one. Number two, I've always heard from neighbors and different aspects of what we want, what we don't want. And sometimes we know up here, the city staff knows, and you guys know, in regards to planning, what's right and what's wrong, and yet sometimes the neighborhood just doesn't get it or doesn't understand or doesn't want it. And one of those things is connectivity. We have lost a lot of connectivity in this community because people have said, no, we don't want it. Greenville Loop Road is a damn good example of it. And we've got a lot more people coming into this community. The traffic is not going to get any easier, and getting around by bike or walking is going to be much better. I can see the trail being used dramatically on Eastwood Road with people trying to get down to Riceville Beach now, where they're using bikes and walking to get to the beach because they're not going to wait in traffic on Eastwood Road, which backs up now almost to Cardinal Lane, which is crazy, okay? So I get where they're coming from. I understand the angst here, but this is a project that we've been working on. It ties right into the overall planning process that we've been working on for quite some time. And I just wish and I hope that we've learned something from this process, because we should never have taken this long to get this project done, ever.
One more comment. Make no mistake about my comments. I have been a proponent of this project ever since it's been up here. I want it to happen. And I think we went from one side of the road to the other side of the road, and it kind of like picking at a scab. It started all over again with that side. So I want it to happen. I really do, and I'm pleased to hear that you've had a large number, a majority of people saying, yeah, we want it. So, you know, I don't want to hold anything up that is critical. I bike on that Hooker Road, and it's dangerous. I do. I mean, I'm not making that up. I go from Greenville, and I take my chances up Wrightsville Avenue. Those bike lanes on Wrightsville Avenue, God love them, they're good, but you're still out there in the traffic. And so this path will be good, and I want it to happen, but frankly, I'm just kind of worn down by those people out there that just make it look like we're the bad guy.
Yes, sir, Mr.
So, like, can you go back to some of the, you showed several, so I mean, go back until you find a map, maybe whatever the first one that comes up. The connection at Wrightsville between Hinton and, there, I guess. Is that Wrightsville Avenue? Yeah, the red right there.
Ave is the red one
So
right
the plan for that is just to basically have a bike lane or a shoulder, correct?
There is currently a bike lane out there on
Right.
both sides of the road, but in the future, as part of the Walk Wilmington plan, we'll be adding sidewalks as well to provide that pedestrian component.
Isn't there the bridge is after, that's right.
Yeah, the bridge is
Okay.
right about here.
You don't have, I think of those, I don't know if we have anybody internally to even do these, but, I think of, like, Cindy Wolf presents a lot of these things, and it has a visual, like an overhead of the trees and so forth. Or do we even have one that looks, even a technical one with, like, what trees we're losing, kind of what's the path look like from a, impact standpoint overall? How many major, I don't know, we have these different categories of trees, whatever they are, how many trees are we taking out?
I don't have that information with me, but I know last year there was a presentation that when there was question about why it wasn't put on the other side of the road and the impacts to each side of the road, which included some aerials and some photos. And some of the biggest thing, too, about moving it to the other side of the road was the utility relocations and how it would affect far more trees.
No, I'd just like to
Yeah.
know. It's going to happen. We're going to deal with it on Wrightsville Avenue, but I'm not. And the other pieces, I think sometime, I look at, like, my favorite stretch of the whole, of one of my favorite stretches of the trail is through Autumn Hall, the way it meanders. We didn't just plow through a tree. Okay, there's a tree there, saw it down, go straight. I think some of these, I don't know that that's even the case here because I don't have a visual of it, but going around them, making it not straight would be, it takes more property, costs us more money, but at the end of the day, you don't just have a sidewalk with every tree out there, taken out. I guess you follow what I'm saying?
I am.
Do we look at it as just a bulldozer approach, or do we look at it as, could we go around this one? Or we say, no, if we go around that one, we'll spend another $10,000, we don't want to do that. That's kind of my question.
Understood. So you made mention of the path that went through Autumn Hall. The difference there is obviously we worked closely with that developer as they were redeveloping it, and we were able to meander it around there. As you mentioned, we try, what we have right now is we have a curb and gutter and have reduced the width of this path to 8 feet to pull it as close to the edge of the pavement as we can. As you mentioned, though, the more you try to meander, you start diving back into people's private property, and we start to get even more opposition, because then we're not just taking easements, we're actually purchasing property from them. So, but
I'm not so sure. I mean, I guess is this thing straight as an arrow?
yes,
Okay. Is there a big tree in the way that we're going to take out?
there's a couple.
Well, I mean, if I owned that property, I'd be happy if you'd leave my tree and go around it, but that's just me. I mean, I think aesthetics matter. I mean, having some shade, building a straight sidewalk. I mean, this isn't a sidewalk. It's a multi-use path. So I'd love to see that if it's available.
We have, yeah, and we can provide an overhead or an aerial, like you talked about. We have engaged with a couple of property owners that were concerned about their trees in the right-of-way and talked about trying to meander it around, I mean, not significantly into their property, but to try to avoid trees, and we did get some pushback from that where they just didn't want the path at all. So there really was no negotiation there.
Yeah, but you say you want your tree or not? I mean, you want to go around it? I mean, when people shut you down by saying they just don't want it all. I mean, you need to come out. So what's coming? Do you want the tree, or do you want to go around the tree? Not just accept that I don't want it. I mean, it's not A, B, and C. It's A and B, and which one do you want? Because you walk off, then they'll call us and say, "I just wish we'd have saved that tree."
No, I wouldn't say.
I didn't know that was an option. Is what I'll hear. And I just we need to really focus on if this thing's common. Which one? You want the tree, or you want us to buy a little of this property?
I can appreciate that. Thank you.
It's hard to meander a path in developed property. If along Eastwood Road, it was virgin land, you had that luxury of being able to do it. I know it was me and Luke, and I think Cliff was with us. We went with you and Dave Cowell out there, and there was another gentleman, I forget who was there.
That was Matt Hypes, our project manager.
Yes, sir. And there were some trees that were saved by some finagling that you all did, and I was very pleased with that. And you can always, go in and put a 4 or 5 inch caliper oak back there, and they'll canopy up in 15 years, so it's not the end of the world, but I hope the project works. I'll be tickled to death to see it. I just been tired of all the negative about, the Hooker Road plan.
I can appreciate
Wish Ms.
that.
Simpson was still here.
Yeah, Luke, hold on, we got another question.
With regards to the 60% acceptance, is that 60% of the right-of-way acceptance?
No, that is the overall property acquisition, all easements, all right-of-way.
Understood, okay. And how about the 2% right-of-way? Do we know a percentage of acceptance on that?
I could find that out for you. Really, it's a small amount that usually is at the corners where we're trying to connect the two roads and we have to kind of come around the radius. We need a little bit more land to tie in those ADA ramps and things like that. So that's usually where the additional purchase comes from.
Thank you.
I hope y'all learned some lessons from this one. I really do. And I hope you and your staff really think about those things moving forward, because it's very important to us and to the citizens we get these projects done quicker, because the longer they languish out there, things change. People move in and out of neighborhoods about 10% a year. And when they do, you may have another group comes in and says, I don't want anything. So please, would y'all please evaluate that as a staff? Thank you.
Good. Appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Okay, R5 is resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year agreement with Central Square Technologies LLC for the maintenance and support of the electronic record management system for the Wilmington Police Department. R6 is resolution authorizing a lease amendment for a portion of the 4th floor of 115 North 3rd Street. R7 is a resolution authorizing a contract for rollout refuge and recycling containers with Schaefer Systems International Incorporated of Charlotte, North Carolina. This was continued from our June 6, 2023 meeting. Yes, sir.
On these, Tony, just in the future, if it's in there, I obviously missed it, but just, I'd love to kind of see, what do we pay the last contract? You know what I'm saying? So I can kind of see what the inflation is, and just, in anything where we're entering into a contract and it's a dollar number, whether it's software or whatever, is it? If it was 800 last contract, it's $1 million this time. If the cart was $47, now it's $49, that kind of thing. Just something to compare to.
Yes, sir.
Because a number just sitting there doesn't mean a lot.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And then the last one is reports RP1's council appointments committees for boards and commissions, and Councilman Reinbach will be giving us a report from that.
I'd like to say something about that.
Okay.
I noticed in the presentation that we did not have the applications from all of the applicants as we have had historically for many, many years, well over a decade. And perhaps it's just an oversight that the applications we see are only of those people that are recommended. And I would like to see all of the applications that have been submitted that are appropriate for these positions.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, just the ones you're reporting on, yes. I believe we've historically done that I know at least for a decade, and I think probably much longer than that. So, yes, I think we'd like to all see that, as well as just the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Manager, is that it?
Yes, sir. That's it until this evening.
Okay, very good. We'll see everybody here in a few hours. Thank you. We stand adjourned.